So you're all welcome to Yoruba Historical Conversation. Today we have Dr. Joseph Adeniran Adedeji that will give us another exposition on the Yoruba agricultural world with the topic Agricultural Yoruba Dwellings for Wellbeing. Yeah, this topic was derived from his book Ecological Urbanism of Universities in Nigeria, an ecosystem service approach. He has I can give you just a short bio of guest lecturer for the day. Joseph Adeniran Adedeji is an associate professor of the Department of Architecture, Federal University of Technology, Akure. He researches the intersections of spatial considerations for the comfortable use of urban open spaces, cultural morphology of city spaces, and more intensely, landscape remix of the urban greens in an African context. He holds a PhD degree in architecture and is a full member of the Nigerian Institute of Architects and has full registrations of the Architects Registrations Council of Nigeria, ACON. He is also a fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Germany, and a research fellow at Nottingham University, Germany. He was also a Carson Fellow at the Richard Carson Center for Environment and Society, in Germany. So his recent book, which he's going to give a little, he has extract the topic for the day from, is Ecological Urbanism of Universities in Nigeria, an ecosystem service approach, and historic urban landscapes of Nigeria, power and transformations in Yoruba culture. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you for your nice introduction. I'm happy to be here, and I wish you a very wonderful listening experience. Now I will share the presentation slide. Uh, just some minutes. Please, can you see my slide now? So I'm presenting on agricultural Yoruba dwellings for well-being. When we talk about the Yoruba cities, we are all aware that we are located in the southwestern part of Nigeria, and these cities have been in existence before the British colonial rule of this region. And this kind of urbanism manifests distinctive features of ecological urbanism in many ways. In ecological urbanism, cities are interpreted as ecosystems, and cities are seen as part of nature, and nature as part of the city. Indeed, ecological urbanism is an agricultural strategy that is designed to solve the current crisis on urban nature. In this crisis, we see nature being designed out of the cities, and In the cities, people want to pave and put concrete everywhere. But when we understand the importance of urban nature, it's going to help us to see the fusion of humans and non-humans from both theoretical and practical perspectives to inform best practices for achieving eco-service systems for human well-being. Indeed, the emerging framework from this work is able to help us to achieve the best eco-cultural systems and eco-service of green nature in Yoruba cities, as we rely on relativist ontology. That is, we see things from different perspectives, and different people would want to interpret nature in different ways. And the methodology for the study was subjectivist, because we allow people to voice out their living patterns so that all those living patterns were condensed into critical eco-cultural frameworks. Cultural environmental crisis, we are aware, as assumed alarming dimensions, and we have lopsided views of the city in general as being made up of built-up spaces, which is largely responsible for the death of green infrastructure in the cities. This calls for us to have a rethink of how cities are defined and designed. And in this discourse, in particular for the Yoruba cities, when we talk of eco-cultural, we are talking about a merging of ecological systems and cultural systems that are able to give us best living patterns and living systems in the city. And when we talk of the green infrastructure in cities, we mean an ecosystem of a network of ecosystems with specific parts that meet different needs and satisfy different functions and are amenable to providing different services. This green infrastructure, they are supposed to provide ecosystem services that meet the peculiar demands of city dwellers in different contexts and in their everyday living pattern systems to ensure their well-being. And this suggests that green infrastructure is a major pro-ecological element of ecological urbanism, all along with rivers, with bays, with hills, and climatic settings, culture, and human history, according to Lewis Mumford in 1968. And the issue of culture in human history is not only germane, but also frames and directs how cities are built and how they are inhabited. Indeed, ecological urbanism is a functional tool for us to redefine the cities from the perspective of green infrastructure to enable their redesign to achieve sustainable goals, that is, the United Nations Sustainable Goals, through appropriate ecosystem services. It is an agricultural strategy whereby human urban spaces are redefined as being composed largely of requisite green spaces sprinkled with essential built forms. That is against the current practices in many urban settings, where the urban spaces are defined from the perspectives of built forms. For us to achieve this, urban design would have to require evidence-based approaches that necessitated this work. However, these evidences have been overtly generalized in the Western Eurocentrically dominated literature, which results in the failure to recognize local patterns and our Yoruba indigenous knowledge system, which are critical to the well-being of the urban dwellers, especially in the global south, where the Yoruba nation belongs. In the global south, the Yoruba people form a large homogeneous ethno-linguistic group in Nigeria and Africa. The Yoruba homeland is an urbanized nation with mega cities, big cities, medium cities, and small-sized cities. And these cities are they predate the European incursion into the urban systems in Nigeria. With a
Elisa,
population of over 14,
Elisa,
over 44 million.
can you help us with your slides, sir? You can scroll through your slides, sir.
Okay, with
Yeah.
over 44 million population, that is in southwest Nigerian, the Yoruba people that form the largest part of that population. Today, Nigeria, the Yoruba population is well over 44 million, according to the World Population Review of 2021. And they occupy the following states: southwestern Nigeria, we have Osun, Ondo, Oyo, Lagos, Ogun State, Ekiti State, and parts of Kwara, Edo, Delta, and Kogi State are shown in the map on this slide. In this vast ethno-geographical space lies the city of Ile-Ife from antiquity, from which the whole world mythologically was created in Yoruba mythology. And therefore, to show that the ecological status of Yoruba dwellings is eco-cultural, the Yorubas have respect for the art, the modern art that we dwell, not only for humans, but also for plants, for animals, for rocks, for burial places, which make it a complete urban ecological system. The geographical, spatial, and sociocultural context of Yoruba cities and dwellings under investigation require a dissection of the concept of what a city is, because when the Europeans came, they felt and thought that these people, that is the Yoruba people, do not have cities, but we have cities, and these cities predate European incursion. The city itself is therefore not a physical element, but analogous to an ecological organism that has a life cycle, that could have a birth, that could grow, that could develop, and could die due to decay, which we witness in many Yoruba cities today. But we can resuscitate this through urban renewal processes that are embedded within agricultural considerations. Yoruba dwellings are not only synonymous to biological living organisms, but are also containers for human and non-human living things in urban ecological systems. The importance of ecological urbanism as a tool for us to analyze and understand urban patterns is demonstrated by the morphology of Yoruba dwellings in the cities. And so the Yoruba cities are characteristically compact, which is a result of their close-knit urban form being produced from peculiar sociocultural processes and mechanisms. The functional efficiencies of Yoruba cities are showcased in their perfectly organized urban system. These are communal open spaces like the King's Palace, in squares around the Central Palace, neighborhood communal open spaces, compound housing with spacious open courtyards and groups that are used in the worship of the gods. And as exemplified with Yoruba cities, ecological urbanism seeks and argues for an ecological approach to remaking existing cities by integrating ecology into their urban spaces through design and redefining of future cities as ecological spaces. This brings a paradigm shift in understanding of cities from built forms where nature has to be designed out. Because today many people say, I don't want to be clearing the bush, just pave everywhere, just put concrete everywhere, to an urban ecological framework where the city is understood as an ecological entity, which this work critically focuses on. People relate with the natural environment in different ecological ways, resulting in human environment in connections and associated ecosystem services that are generally referred to as socio-cultural ecosystem services. They consist of both material and non-material benefits that humans derive from urban ecosystems and natural environments in particular, and contribute to the quality of life and especially well-being. These ecosystem services are generally based on indigenous knowledge system, and that is why in this presentation, this conversation, we are considering the indigenous knowledge system of the Yoruba people, which have capacity to enhance well-being of urban dwellers in Yoruba cities through physical and metaphysical strategies. Ecological urbanism provides a vision of the urban where the landscape is the building block of cities and not architectural forms, that is buildings. It urban spaces that are fully spread and controlled by systems of nature housed in the landscapes. Yoruba urbanism triumphs over the artificiality of cities. In line with this triumph, there are advances that the natural entities of urban landscapes, including soil, water, wind, and light, play specific roles in our well-being. Therefore, the city should be understood as being part of nature and nature as part of the city. The fitness of Yoruba dwellings to conceptualize the ecological urbanism comes as two complementary levels, from bottom up and top down approaches. From bottom up, which is more central to ecological philosophy, which was adopted for this study. The bottom up approach to urbanism fits Yoruba dwellings as a form of cultural urbanism that is produced outside the orthodox legal and regulatory framework, which often results in innovative and ingenious solutions to urban living. In the top-down approach, the influence of colonial city planning, which remains evident outside the core areas of Yoruba dwellings as post-colonial footprints. We know the planning laws, the building laws that we have in Yoruba land today, they were inherited from the colonial masters that imposed the European colonial planning, the European planning system on our urban spaces. And for this, we can characterize the Yoruba cities mainly as homogeneous settings in nature, and have been mainly characterized into three. We have the traditional zone or the core areas where you have the groups and the rest of them. We have the intermediate or transitional zone. We have the new or suburban zone. The core areas or traditional zones mainly occupied by dwellings of the indigenous. The intermediate or transitional zone, they are occupied by both indigenous and non-indigenous, working in the formal sector of each town or city. There is also the last ring, the last component of the rings in the urban setting, new or suburban zone, attributed to high-income earners with well laid out buildings, but devoid of eco-cultural spaces in normal Yoruba setting. The homogeneity in the morphology of Yoruba cities can be attributed to some factors of development that are common to the cities, among which is the common culture of the Yoruba people reflected in the spatial arrangement of the dwellings. In Yoruba dwellings, the concept of eco-survey, that is ecological setting within human environment, and urbanism are intricately linked in a complementary connection to produce applicable guidelines as ecological urbanism, which this project strives to achieve by pushing for policy formulation in redefining the city from ecological perspective. This has been christened as the concept of eco-survey. Yoruba dwellings are one of their most unique cultural representations, because Yoruba people, we see dwellings beyond buildings. We see dwellings as a cultural representations of ecological connection to nature in everyday life. This is unmistakable in different types of non-ornamental gardens that are usually in contiguity to the home buildings or in the courtyards of the building. Ecological urbanism demonstrated through indigenous knowledge system is therefore an avenue for well-being among the Yoruba people in the core areas and a little part of the intermediate areas. The ecosystem services of home gardens, in particular in Yoruba cities, are hinged on indigenous knowledge system. There is an inexplicably interwoven relationship of Yoruba people with nature, and the goal is to achieve well-being through indigenous knowledge system. The indigenous knowledge system of the Yoruba people are laden with environmental stewardship and rewards in the form of derived services, which we call the ecosystem services, the opportunities, and the benefits that humans derive from nature. The practices of indigenous knowledge system by Yoruba people are embedded within deep traditional understanding of all branches of agriculture, ecology, including agronomy, soil science, horticulture, agricultural economics, and extension, which are embedded in the indigenous knowledge system of the Yoruba people. The Yoruba home gardens are largely non-ornamental. They are largely non-ornamental because they produce and they have consumable landscapes. They have edible landscapes, unlike the European system that is now common in the non-traditional setting, the outer layer of the cities, the new areas. They are means of providing other and non-urban materials for the non-syncretic citizens and metaphysical materials for the syncretic practitioners. These home gardens keep provisioning ecosystem services, which include the supply of urban and non-urban materials for medicinal and gastronomic purposes, as well as the cultivation of fruits and vegetables for dietary needs. This is not the case in the new areas, where you see ornamental plants, you see a lot of green spaces that are not consumable, which this study actually argues against. During this study, at Owo, there is a garden there, the home garden of one Venerable Ogini. This is a nickname for now because of the need to hide the identity of this home garden. Soursop, amidst others, is a plant that is common in Yoruba garden, which this garden in particular put in place, not ornamental plants that cannot give ecosystem services that they provide for the needs of the people in the home gardens. Another plant is the king of bitters plant, which is called the Andrographis paniculata, and is of the family Acataceae in this home garden. Is a common plant that every Yoruba person should have in their gardens because they are very important for the treatment of many diseases and infections that could terminate lives. Green spaces, therefore, in Yoruba homes are used for passive recreations. These include you can stroll in your garden, you can have sit out, you can have love gardens, and be in contact with nature, love human beings around you, and also be connected with nature and have love of nature. These spaces are jointly set up by family members, and in the process, they produce a form of socio-cultural co-creation that enhances social unity, kinship bonding, and filial attachment. And therefore, Yoruba cities have eco-cultural qualities of ecological urbanism that is defined by Yoruba culture, local wisdom, and elements of nature rather than by built forms. As sustainable urban settings, they integrate human ecology with everyday cultural life to produce urban landscapes for living, for working, for recreation in traditional ways. In creating a framework for designing agricultural Yoruba dwellings for well-being, the cities have optimum balance of ecological tranquility, especially in the core areas, and cultural requirements for the well-being of dwellers in practical senses. The negative impact of modernization, civilization, and acculturation, and the rest of them on the agricultural milieu of Yoruba cities and homes can be addressed through evidence-based ecological planning and design strategies, where we redefine the city as agricultural spaces. Therefore, agricultural dwellings are all inclusive of the social profiles of the dwellers that was carried out in these studies. Talk of age, talk of education, talk of health, nutrition, security, housing. In fact, we were able to harvest a lot of deep knowledge from different intermediate areas of the city that are not demonstrating ecological urbanism. There must be an innovative approach to balance modernist planning, which we see in the new areas, which are generally colonial and Western, with the indigenous knowledge system. And so there is need to revisit the principles of ecological landscape planning and design that should integrate the indigenous knowledge system through innovative methods to produce agricultural dwellings. Of course, we are all aware that the building and the planning regulations that we have in Western Nigeria, in Southwestern Nigeria here, they were developed from European practices, and that is why there is no specification for specific type of plants to be planted, and even how the species are supposed to be used aside from locating the building. And so this could be achieved through the use of ecological planning framework. This framework, they are graphical or textual or both representations of the concepts and their links that make up the phenomenon of ecological urbanism, and this is the thesis of agricultural cities for holistic understanding. There, in this work, 9 design frameworks were developed, and the first one here is the ecosystem services framework, which is achieved through algorithmic design process, as shown in this figure. The ecosystem services design algorithm is a complete loop with a start and end procedure, which landscape designers and urban designers can explore for their design. And if this is mainstreamed into the building and the planning framework in Southwestern Nigeria, we could be very proud of ecological dwellings that will be for human well-being. Another framework is here, which shows the design algorithm for agricultural homes, where there is need to set desirable goals in pursuit of requisite ecosystem services to determine the type of home gardens that we want to have, as already demonstrated in the core areas of Yoruba cities. And I have here another framework that shows curative medicinal home gardens and what type of plants could be planted and how they could be arranged within the home environment to be able to use them for medicinal purposes. And we have the matching of the plant with specific ailments. Today, the medicinal plants are no more around in the Yoruba home gardens, except at the core area. This needs to be revisited through adequate agricultural planning of the homes. Here I have another home garden design for orchard home garden, which entails the selection procedure for ethnobiological curative purposes, aside from orchard being a vibrant source of assorted fruit for preventing ailments in human body and enhancing human well-being. Here we see another design framework for medicinal home garden that involve a mix of fruits, vegetables, crops, and utilitarian medicinal plants, with majority of the plant providing antioxidant activities in the human body. This will benefit us much more than ornamental plants that are not useful for human well-being in terms of ecosystem services of provisioning. Of course, during this study in Ogbomoso, a professor in one of the federal universities in the Southwest, he did mention that he doesn't like all these ornamental plants. He will plant these consumables in his environment, and they are the flowers that he used to decorate his environment. Another approach to sustainable ecological urbanism in Yoruba dwellings is the urban agriculture. When we look at the Western setting, we see that there is a merging of the city and the rural areas because they now have urban agriculture that is supporting them. We can also do this by having crop garden planning in contiguity with our home building. And we have the viable agricultural components for former crop garden planning in contiguity with home gardens that can enhance human well-being. And the message here is to the policy makers that there's a need to revisit the building and the planning laws to ensure that the home environment, we are not only talking about the percentage of spaces to be developed, but the other spaces, they should not just be paved, but they should be designed for human well-being. If these approaches of producing urban green infrastructure are mainstreamed into the city planning activities and regulations, Yoruba cities will adequately blend the indigenous knowledge system that we see in the core areas of the cities with modernism into unique agricultural milieu and opportunity for agricultural branding of ecosystem services in the cities. Thank you for listening. These are the references for this work. I want to acknowledge the Dawn Commission for the opportunity to present this talk in this conversation. And I also want to thank the Public Relations Office of the Federal University of Technology Akure here for enhancing the publicity of this work. Particularly and very important, I want to appreciate the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation in Germany for sponsoring the one-year George Foster Research Fellowship, during which I wrote this book, The Ecological Urbanism of Universities in Nigeria, from which this conversation was extracted. I also need to appreciate Professor Dr. Roman J.M. Leys for hosting the research fellowship at University of Applied Sciences in Nottingham-Geislingen in Germany. Thank you for listening. God bless you.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me? Welcome back, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm with you, sir.
Okay. Right. So there's a question. First, to thank you for your presentation. I think it's refreshing. It's refreshing. It's something we've not. It's something we've not heard in a long while, and it's quite an eye opener. Yeah. So I'm thinking, there's a question.
You can increase the volume, sir, at your hand.
Okay, let me try that. Is it better now? Hello? Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yes, much better. Thank you, sir.
All right. So in concrete terms, I'm assuming there's a concrete way to measure it. Okay. What are we losing as a society? And even as an individual, by eschewing the eco-cultural practices that you've just mentioned? Is there a way to measure what we are losing? Can we define our loss in concrete terms?
Okay. Now, this work is proposing that the building and planning laws in the southwestern Nigeria that principally originated from the European colonial rule, the British colonial rule, needs to be revisited so that the landscaping of our environment and premises will be based on our indigenous knowledge system of the types of plants that we should have, the quantity we should have, and where we should locate them in our environment, just like we have at the core areas of the city, where they have home gardens with all medicinal plants, some for fetish purposes, some for just utilitarian purposes. So instead of planting ornamental plants like in the European and Western settings generally, we need to revisit our cultural system of connection with plants from the perspective of our well-being, so that we can also have longevity of life and higher life expectancy rate.
Yeah, that's quite clear, sir. Okay. Uh, but I'm saying that if we don't do that, what do we stand to lose?
Okay, we stand to have low quality of life based on our health conditions, and then
Okay.
we'll be spending a lot of resources on these westernly produced drugs instead of our own indigenous knowledge system that are embedded within our normal environmental setting. That's what we'll be losing. We'll be losing money, we'll be losing health, we'll be losing time and other things of life that are associated with well-being.
Okay. So if we are to, in terms of revisiting the planning laws that you have suggested, what are the concrete? You've mentioned the gardening, the type of plants, and the quantity that should be planted. Where do we start? Do we? A number of our urban spaces are built up now.
I'm with you, sir.
Hello, hello.
I'm with you, sir.
Uh-huh. So, are you
Yes,
proposing?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay, are you proposing a policy that will be a backward integration that will, by backward integration, I mean something that will mandate every existing building to comply, or something? Okay, every new building henceforth should maintain this standard.
Now, like I have mentioned, we have three sectors in the morphology of Yoruba cities. We have the core areas which already have this agricultural setting. Then we have the intermediate areas in each city, which is a mixture of both ecosystem services and also modern systems. But we have the new areas, the sprawling areas, the new developing parts of the cities. And if
Okay.
we go there, we will see most of the green infrastructure there, the green system there, the nature there, they are based of ornamental plants
Okay.
that are not edible and do not support human well-being in concrete terms, apart from the supportive ecosystem services like the oxygen that we get from plants and all that. But in terms of consumption, in terms of provisioning, so the planning laws and the building laws that we have presently do not specify the type of plants that should be and what quantity should be in the open spaces around our buildings. So
Okay.
a place to start, a point to start is to revisit that planning law, and this conversation is geared towards that, so that we can raise up policy papers to the people who are in policy making to look at those planning laws because of their European, British origin, and is an imposition of colonial system on the Yoruba people.
Okay. All right. So,
And so in concrete terms, the whoever wants to build now can explore eco-cultural planning system that goes back to the indigenous knowledge system of the Yorubas and embeds that within the planning of their modern buildings in the environment, so that they can also enjoy the benefits of nature that we normally enjoy in traditional Yoruba settings.
okay. Right. Can we also say that the way we build, which is European centric, the way we plan our urban settings, is also, or to what extent is it responsible for the loss of our indigenous knowledge system from generation to generation?
Now, the current planning and building laws, they do not originate from our indigenous knowledge system.
Yes.
They originate from the colonial rulers, and their own understanding of nature is quite different from that of the Yorubas. So they have not include or build the planning and the building laws based on our indigenous knowledge system. That is the need. That is why there is a need to revisit those building and planning laws, so that within modernization we can also bring traditionalism, and then we can have a co-production of well-being with our built environment, especially dwellings.
Okay. So if we are to sell this policy, what would be its highest? I know, I mean, I can understand the feeling of uh, uh, imperialism and all of that. But what would be the highest selling point of this policy that you are advocating? If we are to sell it, whether to government, whether to people, because really, I think government really does not even, maybe even on our own, we should be that conscious enough to say, okay, let me plan this, let me plan that, and all of that. But what would be the highest selling point that we can take to start advocating for it?
Now, the highest selling point is well-being, that our well-being depends on our environment. And it's not only cleanliness, but the indigenous knowledge system that the Yorubas have. If we want to get the best from our environment, we need to prepare them and produce them in the ways that we give, include nature, the nature of plants that will be different from the Western setting where they use ornamental system. Their plants are not edible around the home environment, and we can understand that they have enough wealth, so to say, so that if they don't have any consumable or edible landscape around them, they can still, but in our own setting that is not the case. So the selling point will be that it will give us food resources for our gastronomic needs. It will give us herbal plants, and those herbal plants, they are not necessarily having to do with maybe spirit and all that. We can use herbal plants in our environment for our own well-being without consulting any herbalist. But we cannot use those herbal plants if we have not planted them, if we don't know their benefits. And that is why those frameworks that are proposed, they are very central to revisiting. Okay, I see a question here. We are not going back to thatch roof and mud buildings and all that. We are talking about making the indigenous knowledge system to be embedded in our planning environment, such that the kind of plants we have, instead of paving, some people say they don't want to cut grass, they don't want anything, they just want to they just want to pave everywhere so that they will not cut bush or grass. And those people that even say they want to have green nature around them, they don't plant edible things, they plant ornamental things, as if we are in Europe or we are in the Americas, either North America or South America, or we are in Australia. This is Yoruba land. We should cherish our indigenous knowledge system and see how to embed them within this modern method of construction that we have in the arrangement of our open spaces around the buildings, and what kind of materials that we put on them. Now, I see another question here. What are the factors that led to the crowd out of Yoruba community system in the contemporary society, like the Indian, Chinese, Japanese? Why has Yoruba indigenous system not been wide? Now, the Yoruba indigenous knowledge system has been affected through modernism, colonialism, urbanization, and the rest of them. If we look at the way the Yoruba built their dwellings before, we will understand there was cohesion, living pattern. People live together as communities. If a young man wants to set up his own nuclear family, it will still be in the premises. That's why they have those large compounds, and within those compounds they have the courtyard system that enables them to do their spiritual worship, either religious activities. They also have garden for their kitchen environment and all those kind of living pattern. We are not advocating that. Of course, that will be very difficult to change, because now people live on individual basis. They don't want to live, some people don't even want to live with two people in a room, or talk less of a building. So they want to be on their own. And so if they have decided to be on their own, they should not design out nature from the environment. Let's stop paving the environment with concrete, with interlocking and all that. The open spaces that we have, we can bring indigenous knowledge system into them, so that we can achieve the benefits of nature that the Yoruba generation has always achieved. So that is the point.
Then I would also like you to say more about a statement you made, that urban spaces is the building block of the society. You know, we kind of see it as building, not space. We kind of think of spaces as luxuries, something that we can have, and building are actually the building blocks of the society.
Now, when God created humanity, he created the garden.
Mhm.
That is nature. That is the best. That is the best environment for humans to live. But today, because of urbanization, we have concentrated so much on buildings instead of the open spaces and the landscape around buildings that can give us long life and also the well-being that we need for our daily activities and social life. And so, for us to get the best from creation, we need a connection with nature in the built environment. And so we should not just see the city as being composed of buildings. That is the understanding that is affecting how those cities are also constructed, especially the intermediate parts of Yoruba cities that don't even have concern for nature, and also the new areas. Those new areas of the cities, if you ever seen nature in them, they will be ornamental parts of nature that do not really bring human benefits.
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you very well, sir.
Okay. So there's another question that asks if the eco-cultural dwelling that is based on Yoruba indigenous knowledge, as you're advocating, is it already part of the curriculum of architecture in our higher institutions?
Okay, that's a good question. Uh, of recent, there was a review of the curriculum and curricula in general, which we call the CCMAS. So, uh, parts of these are already embedded in the training of students for landscape architecture, not for building architecture. Because in the actual sense of it, the building that we should have should be a product of collaborative efforts of different disciplinary teams. And so, hello?
Hello? Network today is just crazy, man. So you mentioned some plants that should be in our gardens. You mentioned soursop. You mentioned king of bitters. Those are the two that I picked. Are there other ones?
Now, in the last set of slides, I showed frameworks that has a long list of so many plants that could be mixed together in different home garden settings. So that list has a very, that those slides with the framework contain all the plants that are very useful for
Okay.
our home planning environment, and how we can use them to nurture different home garden designs, not horticultural gardens that are presently embraced in many parts of Yoruba cities, especially the new areas of the cities and large part of the intermediate areas of the cities.
Okay.
So apart
Right.
from the soursop and the king of bitters, we have numerous that are already embedded in those in the list there.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir. We must thank you. This has been a very interesting conversation. It's something that we kind of overlook, but we thank you for this reawakening, for pointing us back to this area of our knowledge system, and something that we think is costing us dearly in terms of health, in terms of man-hour losses, in terms of money, and all of that. Okay, so we thank you very much, sir. Your research.
I need to appreciate the Dawn Commission for this wonderful opportunity for this conversation, and I know it's just a little beginning.
Yes, sir.
We hope for greater collaboration, especially
Definitely.
in pushing for policy, raising policy papers and policy guidelines that can see how we can help us, how we can mainstream this kind of conversation into the building and planning laws in southwest Nigeria, so that within our modernism we can also enjoy traditionalism that would enhance our well-being, our quality of life, and also how we can have better life expectancy rate like enjoyed by the Yoruba generations in the past. Thank you very
So,
much. I really appreciate this
all right.
opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Your book, where can it be? Is it on sale anywhere?
Okay, this book was produced by Stranger Nature. That's a global international publisher, and it's very expensive. And but as an author, I have few copies, especially for the policy makers. So for the Dawn Commission, I already have 6 copies for the Dawn Commission. The
Thank you very
book
much.
is well over, I would say, like 140,000 per copy.
Wow.
But I have these complimentary copies. So for the office in Ondo State, Akure here, I have delivered a copy. So I have copies for the other southwestern states,
Yes,
for the
after
Dawn
rest.
Commission offices,
Okay.
which I'm holding they are still available. I know that very soon there will be opportunity to
pick
make
them up.
sure that they get to you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We will get back. We will last with you on that. Thank you very much for coming on this conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate you, sir. My regards to the guys on the top and the office.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye.
I appreciate.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.